Hello, everyone. Welcome to week 15 of our ongoing series of Introduction to Christian History. This is week 15, and my name is Professor Joseph Holbrook. This week, we're going to review the Civil Rights Movement of the 1960s, the rise of the religious right in the 1980s, the role of John Paul II in helping bring about the demise of the Soviet Union, and we're going to look at feminism and liberation theology in the 1980s and into the 90s. This course forms or provides the introduction for our 15 credit certificate in Christian Studies in the fall of 2022 in the Religious Studies Department at Florida International University in Miami. We will conclude this week with an overview of the rise of new types of churches at the end of the 20th century and the Protestant debate over women's ordination, which is still going on, surprisingly. So, Christianity and transition in the 1960s. In the 1960s, we saw radical changes in social attitudes throughout the Western world. This actually led to a questioning of Christianity's ideas and the value of its social role. It was an age in which Christianity would undergo change and development. The theories of secularization that were dominant in the 1960s suggested that the increasingly industrialized societies would undergo some form of secularization. But reality turned out to be quite a bit different. As the role of the churches in the civil rights movement, that is the black Christian churches, even Jewish leaders that came to get rallied together to support Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in his leadership of the civil rights movement. That makes clear that the role of religion in the public sphere had not diminished, but it was still very present. And then a few short years later, in the late 1970s, we began to see the rise of the religious right with Jerry Falwell, Pat Robertson, and others. And that's another example of the role of Christianity, or at least religion, in the public sphere, for good or for ill. So the key to the success of the civil rights movement was the black churches in the southern states. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a pastor of a Baptist church himself in Atlanta. The struggle for the civil rights was to be understood as a religious struggle, echoing the great themes of the Old Testament narratives in the liberation of Israel from its bondage in Egypt. For this reason, mass political meetings of the civil rights campaign often mimicked the structure and tone of church services, partly because they were seen as a natural extension of the religious and social visions deeply rooted in the history of the Black South. What triggered the civil rights movement was an incident in Montgomery, the Montgomery bus boycott of 1955. A black woman, Rosa Parks, got on a bus, and then she was arrested in 1955 for refusing to give up her seat to a white man under the Jim Crow laws that enforced discrimination against black people. Opposition to this arrest, unjust arrest, and the discriminatory attitudes towards black people was led by the Black Baptist pastor, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. King adapted Gandhi's philosophy of nonviolence and began to use that in Alabama and Georgia to begin to advocate and agitate for an end to discrimination. The churches became increasingly involved in nonviolent protests. There was a successful campaign in Birmingham, Alabama, followed by a massive march on Washington in August 1963. I was 12 years old at that time, so I remember it well. The Kennedy administration was spurred to activity by the media coverage of police overreaction against the demonstrators. And the federal government began to roll back Southern legislation, ending much, though not all, of the racial discrimination in the South, at least in the legal domain. The civil rights movement brought about two developments which marked the reentry of churches into the political process. First, King's program of social action was clearly seen to be based on a theological vision of the transformation and renewal rather than the agenda of a specific political party. In other words, Dr. King was not a partisan. He chose to align himself with neither Republican nor Democrat, but operated outside the political establishment. In his speech in August of 1963 on the steps of the Washington Monument, King gave a speech called "I Have a Dream," which is widely hailed as a rhetorical masterpiece. It is deeply rooted in Old Testament vision of justice and freedom and providing a theological defense for acting for change. Prophetic themes from Isaiah 40 are woven into the fabric of the speech, articulating both hope and vision. And this brings us to a picture of Dr. King. If I can get this to work. And here he is. So this led to greater political engagement for Christians. The second thing about Dr. King's success made it clear that churches could and should become involved in political debates and direct action without compromising their principles. The Civil Rights Campaign made it religiously acceptable for churches and individual Christian leaders to become politically engaged. This second lesson was developed further by a very different Christian group, the religious right. As we move into the 1970s, hang on a second, there we go. So here you see vote the Bibles, take a stand for morality, and below it are a bunch of Bush Cheney signs. So this means that religion was now in the political process, for something for which I have very mixed feelings. So the rise of the religious right. Conservative Protestants in the United States in the early 60s were politically disinterested and inactive. This goes back to the fundamentalist withdrawal from the public sphere in the early 20th century. It was a axiom among conservative Christians that politics was best left to politicians. Jerry Falwell was a conservative Southern Baptist pastor in Virginia, and he was very critical of more liberal Baptists for becoming involved in the civil rights conflict and supporting Dr. King in the 1960s. Falwell saw his role as limited to ministering to the spiritual and pastoral needs of his people. However, this began to change, leading to an even, actually, oh, come on, how do I get rid of that? Okay, I'm back after a slight technical malfunction. So there was a number of court cases that swept through the conservative American Protestant churches, creating a backlash or a reaction. These three pivotal court decisions ruled that a prayer used in school system was unconstitutional. The text of the prayer was, "Almighty God, we acknowledge our dependence upon Thee, and we beg Thy blessings upon us, our parents, our teachers, and our county." Certainly nothing in there that indicates a preference for a particular church group, and even could be considered not necessarily Christian any more than Jewish. However, some atheists brought objections to it, particularly a woman by the name of Madeline Murray O'Hare, who was the founder of the Organization of American Atheists and served as its president. There was also a couple of other situations, a couple of other legal decisions. One of them was Roe versus Wade in 1973, legalizing the first trimester of abortion. And then there was also a sanctioning of government involvement in private Christian academies with Lemon and Kurtzman in 1971. So these three decisions created quite a backlash and reaction among Christians. This was Murray versus Curlett. She was the one who brought about the case as on behalf of atheism, demanding that the prayer be removed from schools. She was also sympathetic with communism and tried to immigrate to the Soviet Union. And so these decisions were thus widely regarded by religious conservatives as an attempt to secularize the United States, using constitutional separation of church and state as a means of eliminating religion from the public school system, and possibly from public life in general. Falwell and others saw these developments as a wake-up call and began to organize opposition. Jerry Falwell was a conservative Southern Baptist pastor. He was critical of the more liberal Baptists for becoming involved with Dr. King in the 1960s. His view, his quietism, at least before 1977, could be interpreted as a lingering after effect of the fundamentalism of the 1920s. However, he became mobilized when he saw what was happening with these court cases that were limiting the exercise of Christianity in the public sphere. Another such leader, not a pastor, was Pat Robertson, who was a TV host and owned his own radio station and TV station, and also was a one-time candidate for president. There was also Phyllis McAlpin Stewart Shafley, who set out to defend tradition Christian values, especially in the area of the family and traditional gender roles. She was a constitutional lawyer. Both fundamentalism and the religious right fell under threat from rapid cultural change. The difference between the two movements, that is, the fundamentalist movement and the religious right. Fundamentalism withdrew from mainstream culture after the 1920 debacle with the Scopes Monkey trial, and it just criticized mainstream culture from the sidelines. The religious right, on the other hand, chose to engage with mainstream culture and try to change it from within. By the late 1970s, it was clear that this strategy was having considerable success. Evangelicalism was becoming a significant political force. Although the religious right drew support primarily from conservative evangelical Christians, the movement also attracted politically conservative Catholics, Jews, and even Mormons. Yet the movement divided evangelicals. Many believed that the political activism encouraged by Falwell and Robertson would ultimately damage spiritual values and the reputation of the churches. Though sympathetic to the aims of the movement, some argued that it was more important to concentrate on the pastoral and spiritual matters than to win elections. And let's go take another look at a couple of other significant characters in this story. In 1976, there was a little-known Democratic candidate for president who had been a former governor of Georgia, Jimmy Carter. He was a peanut farmer in southern Georgia, and he had been a naval officer. He ran for president in 1976. He won the presidency because of a thirst among Americans for some change. He also claimed or identified himself as a born-again Christian, and after the corruption of the corruption of Richard Nixon, there was a hunger among Americans for a more moral approach to the presidency. He had little sympathy, as a liberal Democrat, he had little sympathy with the values of the religious right. The only thing he might have in common with them was the fact that he was an evangelical Christian and a Baptist Sunday school teacher. His religious values did appeal to some conservative Christians, me among them. I voted for him in 1976. Yet it was clear that the religious right's preference would be for a Republican president who took religion seriously. And this leads us to our next character in this story, Ronald Reagan, who became president of the United States in 1980. He defeated Jimmy Carter, who was running for his second term, and Ronald Reagan is widely seen as marking a public realization that religion was no longer a matter of private conviction, but about to be a battle for public values. Although Reagan himself was not a very religious person, the contrast with Carter is significant. He realized the importance of religion as a political issue. You might say he used the evangelicals to get elected. At a national affairs briefing organized by the Religious Roundtable during the presidential campaign of 1980, Reagan made a quip to a gathering of conservative Christian leaders that became a game changer. He said, "I know that you can't endorse me, but I endorse you." And that certainly led them to become a little more enthusiastic about his candidacy. This leads us to another issue, the erosion of denominationalism during this time period. The religious landscape of the United States have been shaped by the structures and the habits of its European origins. The Protestant denomination is a European phenomenon, reflecting the church life of Western Europe from the 16th to the 18th century. Patterns of religious affiliation and belonging reflecting the general situation of Western Europe and often the specific conditions of religious life in England were exported to Africa, America, and Asia and Australia by both the settlers and the missionaries. As a result, the emerging church life of four great continents has been shaped to a greater or lesser extent by the historical contingencies and structures of Western Europe. The Protestant denomination initially seemed to thrive in the United States, reflecting ecclesial loyalties on the part of immigrants arising from their European roots. You can see this especially among Lutherans, Methodists, Presbyterians. In his book called The Social Sources of Denominationalism, published in 1929, H. Richard Niebuhr, a prominent American theologian and brother to Reinhold, argued that denominations were a distinguishing mark of American religious life. They were rooted in historical differences of social class, wealth, national origin, race, and hence were integral to the complex tapestry of American cultural identity. Yet after 1990, many of these denominations were clearly in decline. By this time, mainline denominations had lost about one-fifth and even up to one-third of their 1965 memberships. At a time when the population growth of the United States had surged, denominational membership was declining. A real numerical decline thus converted into a significant reduction in the proportion of America's population associating with these denominations. So these Christian denominations in America are one of the very few institutional expressions of early modern European culture still in existence. But why, many are increasingly asking, why should modern America's religious life be made dependent upon a European model, when that model was now seen as having failed back in its homelands? Both individual churches and Christians are showing an increasing reluctance to define themselves denominationally. Many churches have named themselves after their localities, skillfully dropping any reference to their denomination. Richard Niebuhr's argument reflected his perception that Protestant denominations reflected historical memories of a European origin, perceptions of social location within a stratified society, and issues of personal identity. But in the 1990s, some strongly entrepreneurial Protestants found themselves more and more frustrated by the institutional inertia of traditional denominational structures. And so they decided to do an end run around it and to build churches without denominational identities. And this leads us to new types of congregations that emerged in the 1980s, of which I was part of one. I will leave this until our next episode, which will be on Wednesday of week 15. I will talk to you then. Thank you so much for your kind attention. As always, we will continue our survey of 2,000 years of Christian history. We're coming close to the finish line. This course is the core required introduction to our 15 credit course on Christian studies at FIU and the Religious Studies Department. Feel free to reach out to me. I will include my phone number and my email address below. You can reach out and if you want to inquire about signing up for the certificate. Also, I can let you know what courses I'll be teaching next semester. All right, thank you. Have a great week. Talk to you soon. Bye.